So I've been planning some renovations at my house recently, and I tell you, so much effort goes into designing a space that is both functional and beautiful, and you just want to use every day. So in this episode of Creativity Uncovered, I'm going to be speaking with someone who does this day in and day out. So please join me, Abby Gatling, on my journey to uncover how everyday people find inspiration, get inventive, and open their imagination. Basically, through this podcast, I want to find out how people find creative solutions at home, at work, at play, and everything in between. And my goal for this podcast is that by the end of it, you'll be armed with a whole suite of tried and tested ways to summon creativity the next time that you need it. Now, today, I'm super excited to be speaking with Steve Griggs, who is New York's premier landscape designer, all about his creative process. Welcome, Steve.
Glad to be here. I'm in New York, and it's Friday morning where you are. This is a great time to do this podcast because I'm currently doing a renovation inside my house. And if my wife shows me one more shade of gray, I'm going to scream. I'm not kidding. It's like there's 40 shades of gray and they all look the same. So this is going to be a very good one because I'm in the middle of it. Kitchen, floors, painting. I'm living it.
That's what I have to look forward to, right?
You know what? I keep telling myself it's going to be worth it when it's all done. Like even when you do an outdoor project, it's always worse before it gets better. So this is super exciting here because I am living it.
Now, Steve, you actually don't do the interior of design. You're a landscape designer, which means you work in outdoor spaces. Tell me, how did you actually get into that in the first place? Because you're from New York. Most people don't necessarily think outside green spaces with New York. Tell me about that.
That's a very good question because I went to school down in Mississippi, and every time they asked me, they wanted to know if I have grass where I live, right? So I live outside the city in the suburbs where there's houses and grass and trees and all that. I basically just like being outside and working outside. And when I took the high school aptitude test, I checked all the boxes that I'm not one to be sitting behind a desk all day. So there you have it. 40 years later, I'm still here.
That's good. Okay, so I've just made a faux pas. Every time people talk to me about living in Australia, they're like, do you ride a kangaroo to school?
Yeah, same thing.
Everywhere. Same thing. New York.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Concrete. I'm in the concrete jungle. They call this concrete jungle.
Yeah. It's all the movies we watch, I think. That's the issue.
That's right. I mean, Crocodile Dundee, right? That's the only thing I know.
Yeah. So landscape design, wonderful thing. Tell me, what does the perfect space look like? What are the elements that need to be ticked off in your eyes to have a good space?
So basically, when you're designing an outdoor space, I try to explain to people because people seem to understand the interior better than the exterior. So when I try to explain the exterior, I try to picture the outdoor room, right? So inside the room, you have carpet and flooring. Outside, you have patios or grass. Same thing with the walls. It could be a fence. It could be tall hedges. And then same with like a ceiling. It could be a canopy. It could be a pergola overhead. Lighting could be a lamp, a landscape lamp. So it's the same kind of elements. When I phrase it that way, they kind of understand it a little bit better because typically the outdoors is not as much. The homeowners don't really use the outdoor spaces as much as they renovate the indoor spaces. So when I equate it to the outside, they kind of connect the dots. So it makes a lot of sense.
Oh, absolutely. That makes perfect sense in my mind. Where I am here in Australia, it's super hot. We're subtropical. Our outdoor space is just an extension of our home. We consider it to be another room. So the way you describe that is perfect for me. But so you call yourself a landscape artist. I've read that in a few articles about you. Tell me what is the creativity that's needed in this line of work?
So I don't really like the word landscape architect because people would say, oh, I need my grass cut, right? They don't really understand what a landscape architect / designer is as opposed to just a landscaper. So I said, well, let's call it a landscape artist, because typically when I go to a job site, I have to see the site. I have to put, we call it boots on the ground, because you have to walk the site and get a sense of what the space feels like, as opposed to just looking at it on a picture or a computer screen. You may see a focal point like a rock outcrop, a nice vista or view of water or mountain, and you want to try to incorporate all that. So you really need to walk the space with the client and try to get inside their head to see what they're trying to, what the space should feel like when it's all done.
Oh, yes, what it should feel like. That's great. So what are the feelings that you generally want to get from an outdoor space like that?
Just like anybody else, it's like you want to get a sense of security. It's your own space. Every space we design has a custom element to it. So no two spaces are alike. You try to make it a signature piece for each project so they can call it their own. And you want to get the clients involved because it's more of a collaboration. My job is just to really to lead them up the mountain, right? Just to kind of lead them to create their vision and put it into 3D lot, touch it and feel it, as opposed to just Googling it and reading about it. So I have to kind of take what's in their head and put it into 3D in real life.
Yes. So what does that look like? What does that creative process look like for you?
Always starts out with a can of spray paint. I always bring my spray paint. I'm known for my spray paint. Like they can't visual. Years ago when I started, there was no 3D renderings. There was none of that. It was basically just plan views. And when you showed somebody a blueprint, they looked at you like they had three heads, because if you're not in this field, you don't know what it's supposed to look like. So the 3D renderings help you visualize the space. But when you take out a can of spray paint and you spray their swimming pool on their lawn and you spray paint out their patio, then it becomes real and comes to scale. And then it all starts to make a lot of sense. I'm telling you, a $5 can of spray paint works wonders.
Okay, so you have a conversation with them and you sort of have an idea of what you want to do. You map it out, which I think is so important because a lot of people can't imagine what it's going to look like. How do you take your client on the journey with you and get them into what's happening in your brain?
They'll start talking about like plants and flowers and stuff, and I don't even go there. Just tell me what you want it to feel like when you come outside. I've had people say, I want to feel like I'm at a 5-star hotel. Then I know it's going to be a little more contemporary, a little more modern, a little cleaner. I want to feel like I'm in a I want to feel like I'm at the beach. Then I know I'm going to plant grasses and certain types of hydrangea plants that grow here. I want to feel serene and all. Then I know I have to incorporate some fragrant flowers and stuff like that. So you have to kind of get the sense of it, and you design around the feeling that they want to create.
Wow. So there's like a certain amount of decoding what people are saying and translating that into this like practical
Not
execution.
easy though, because you have the husband wants one thing, the wife wants another. So I have to play marriage counselor in the middle, right? So I'm trying to like tread the water. He wants to know what it's going to cost, and she just wants what she wants, right? So we're trying to like get what they want and keep everybody happy at the same time.
Yeah, is that hard to do? Like, do you ever get to a point where you're like, okay, let's just stop this project until we all get aligned, or are you able to sort of bring them around?
Once you get to the point where you kind of flush out their vision, right? Then you have to kind of get a sense of what you want the space to look like and feel like, and then it always comes down to the mighty, what's this going to cost? Everybody looks on Pinterest and Instagram, they see all these beautiful gardens, but then we have to have that heart to heart conversation. Cost is, everybody can see what they want, but it comes down to cost and budget. You want to design something that fits into the neighborhood, right? You don't want to have a $500,000 house and a $5 million landscape, right? It all has to kind of work. You do it as an investment, right? Because if you put, they say a properly designed landscape can increase the home value up to 20%. So it's also an investment as well.
Yes. Wow. So it sounds like there's a lot of considerations in it. It's almost like, composing, an artwork or something like that. You've got to kind of make sure it all mixes in and the colors go and the composition is right and balanced. It's really interesting.
Yeah, we're not even at the color selection yet. We're not even at the plant selection. We're just trying to define the space. What's the space going to feel like? How is it all going to flow? How does the people going to come out of the house and go onto the patio? So you work on those spatial elements first, and then you kind of just create the different living areas. Like over here, we want to have the kids' play area. Here, we want to have the outdoor kitchen area. Same thing when you're designing a house. There's the kitchen, the living room, the hangout area. So you're trying to define all the spaces. Then you start whittling it down to materials, colors, size, exactly like an interior designer would do.
Yes, yeah. Big, and then just start
Yes.
refining. Yeah.
I've had people say to me, "Oh, I don't like yellow flowers," and we're not even near there. The place looks like, there's a giant hole in the ground for the swimming pool. We're not even at that discussion. And one of the hardest part is to try to keep the clients on track, because they'll start talking about the flowers and the colors. I try to keep them, focused on the next task at hand. You want to start with big and go small, correct?
Yeah, wow. So you do have pretty much a set process that you follow with every client, that you've got to do
Absolutely.
it in the right order.
You have to do it in the right order. And logistically, sometimes if we do a job in New York City and I have to bring the plants up 20 stories to a terrace on the balcony, how logistically we're going to get the material up there? Because most people don't understand the construction process of it. It's also, logistically, how are you going to move machines in and out, patios, plants, dirt, a lot of different moving parts.
Yes, yeah. So there's the artistic element, but also logistics and construction.
That's a whole nother, yeah, that's construction part of it. So the design portion of it, I think anything that you design, a good designer has to design something that is executable, right? You don't want to just show a pretty picture on a plan or a pretty picture on a 3D rendering. It has to be buildable. I mean, I've seen so many designs that look great, but it's just way over budget, not practical to build. It just doesn't work.
Are there ways of being creative with the solutions where you can work within people's budgets, or are there some things where you're like, actually, that's just not going to happen on the budget that you've got?
Absolutely. I mean, so then we can what we call value engineer it, right? It's just a fancy word for, okay, you don't want the porcelain tile. I can get you a nice looking brick paver that almost looks like porcelain, right? For half the price. And same with the planting. The planting, instead of a 10-foot tree, let's put it in at 6 feet. It may take a couple of years to go, but eventually, if you're a little patient, after 3 years, everything will kind of fill in together and look like it's supposed to look.
Mm.
So there's different ways to fit the different budgets for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Because I do think like a huge aspect of creativity is that sort of lateral thinking and problem solving. And it sounds like you have to do that almost on a daily basis.
Every day. That's just on the design of it. Then you have the construction end of it, which is another, firefighting every day.
Yeah.
The design part is actually very easy.
Yeah.
For me, it's the implementation of that design, right? It's not good to just do a design and hand it off to a guy and say, here, go build this, because things are going to change throughout the projects and you may have to make certain adjustments on the fly. You're digging a hole, you hit a big rock, you have to move the pool a little bit. So there's all different elements that come up day to day for sure.
Yes. So you manage the entire process, because I can imagine, yeah, as you said, you hand it off to someone else, they're going to have their interpretation of what the plan is and how it should be. It could be easy for your vision to kind of get lost along the way.
You try to give them a very detailed plan as much as possible, but it's interpretation, right? So, and also like the positioning of the plants, sourcing the right plant material, positioning it, things may not look exactly the way they do on the plan. I may have to make some in the field adjustments to get it to look just right.
Absolutely. And so you mentioned before that a huge part of the initial stages of your design process is that you're trying to create the vision for your client based on what they've told you. What happens when you don't quite gel with their vision? Like, how do you stay creative and how do you stay motivated to continue with that project?
Maybe you can rephrase that. How do I stay motivated when it's not going accordingly?
Yeah, so say you have this wonderful vision for a project and how it should be, and your client doesn't quite agree with you. Well, like, how do you do that?
It just comes from the New York attitude and the New York. I just tell them it's not going to work. Like, it's a waste of money. I have better solutions. That's why they hire me, right? To lead them. If they can figure all the answers out themselves, they wouldn't need someone like me. So we can kind of so together we kind of walk through the situation and come up with the best solution.
Yeah.
We sometimes it's not always. Yeah, they want one thing and it's not practical. Let's say so. We have to kind of. I mean, listen. You can pretty much do anything if you're willing to spend enough money behind it. My job is to try to get you the best project for the best price and keep the project on budget. That's kind of my goal, right? So you kind of have to lead them in the right way.
A bit of negotiation there. I mean, that certainly happens in my role. I do marketing, and there's a client's vision, and when they're so steadfast on their vision, and you're like, well, actually, this goes against the design principles. This shouldn't go ahead this way.
One of the things, well, it's funny you say that, because one of the things that really sends things into a tailspin is when they start second guessing themselves, right? And then they start coming back to me with second guessing, and then they're asking me, what do you think? Or you don't want to really ask the client, what do you think? You know what I'm saying? You don't want to stay in your lane. You hired me because I'm the professional. If you start putting too much input and I start listening to all that crazy input, it gets crazy fast, very fast.
Yes. But that takes a lot of confidence to say that, like, I'm the professional, you've hired me for this, you should trust me. Like, have you felt that way the whole way through, or is that something you developed throughout your career, that confidence to stand up for yourself?
It's 40 years of doing this. I've installed thousands of jobs. Like, I can't even tell you, thousands over 40 years. That's a long time. So yes, I pretty much tell them I've planted a lot of trees. So you probably would be best if you listen to me. That's just my advice. You can do what you want, but I'm just telling you my experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that was a learning lesson for me, is that early on in my business that, you think that you want to try and appease the client as much as possible and keep them happy. But I guess at a certain point, you're like, actually, I've got the expertise, I've got the training, I do this day in and day out. My voice is valid here.
It's like I was just telling you, before we started, it's like 8 shades of gray. My wife, there's like 40 shades of gray. You're like, I can't decide. Give me like 3 to pick from. Like, the worst is taking the client to like the stone yard or the nursery, and there's just so many things coming at you. It becomes overwhelming for them. So you want to try to guide them in the right way. You don't want to give them too many options because it gets overwhelming.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely considered part of the process is giving them the autonomy to choose, but only within the realm that you've set.
Yeah, you want to pick a gray? It's medium, dark, or light gray. We're not going 40 shades, and every shade of gray has a different name. I mean, right? You know what I'm talking about. There's like, so yeah, so that's really helped, and you try to keep them on track so we can keep the job on time, on budget, and get what you want. Because once you start making, I always tell people, listen, I can change it on a piece of paper for no charge. Like, we can design. It's best to flush out the design process early on, get all the materials picked out, get everything selected, because once I go to the job site and I have to start moving things with man and machinery, it gets very expensive very fast.
Yeah, I can imagine. And so you've been doing this, 40 plus years. How has this changed during that time? Like, has the industry changed or your process changed throughout that time?
I mean, just the communication has changed. Emails have changed. I mean, there was no such thing as podcasts like this have changed. You can learn a lot from podcasts. You can learn a lot. I mean, basically, you can just type in Google and Google anything. Oh, that's another thing I like to talk about. I can always tell when a client's been Googling. It's like when they tell you don't Google medical questions, because then you got it's the same thing. So they start Googling. I can hear what they're asking me, and I'm like, you Googled it, right? Don't believe everything you read on Google or type it in, because then they have more stuff in their head.
So technology has certainly played a factor in.
It played a factor. It's definitely helped because of the 3D renderings for sure. The clients can really visualize things a lot better. That has changed. That I would have to say that's been the biggest change in everything, just in everybody else's life, technology, right? And I'm still trying to learn. I learn. I have to keep up with the learning, right? But I still use my spray can. Spray can works the best.
Never retiring the spray can.
Never retiring the spray can. I still draw my designs by hand. I still do because when I went to college, there was no CAD drawings or 3D renderings. I draw them by hand. I put the vision on paper in the sketch form, and then I hand it off to my staff that can make it look all pretty and fancy with all the renderings and all.
Yeah. I mean, like you said before, you have the professionals, you were the expert in that particular area, you let them do it. You do what you do best, which is the vision and the initial strategy. Let someone else do the actual technical part of the drawing for you.
Absolutely. Because they don't really have the in-field experience that I do, right? So it's very hard for them to kind of take it out of my head and put it on paper. So I give them, rough sketch with some pencils and some magic markers, and they basically can understand it from there.
Yes, yeah. And that's a really cool long career. How have you stayed motivated and fresh creatively over that time?
Each client is different. It's not like I'm doing commercial landscaping. Each client has their own taste and styles. No two clients are alike. Everyone has their own motions and what they want it to feel like and the spin on it. So it's always, every job is different. Every single job is different. I'm still playing with plants. So it's basically, I'm still playing with plants, rocks, and dirt, right? So just keep that in mind. It's the same thing, but it's different configurations and different materials, but it's all the same, it's the same materials, more or less, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I play with dirt. That's what I play with dirt, rocks. That's what I do, right? But it's where you place the rocks, where you place the plants, the drainage going to affect everything, where you're going to put the outdoor kitchen. So it all has to be, there's a whole lot of things that go on behind the scenes that, that it makes it a little more challenging than just putting an outdoor kitchen somewhere, right? So that's the secret sauce.
Yeah.
Where anybody can dig a hole, but where you dig the hole really matters.
Yeah. That's where you're.
I always like to say the pen is mightier than the shovel, right? So the pen is mightier than the shovel, meaning if I put it on paper, it's easier to move the trees around on paper as opposed to, digging the hole and moving it somewhere else, right? So I like that little catchphrase.
I like that because I can imagine, when you're dealing with such big things like pools or, that you've got to establish trees or whatever like that, it's so much harder to undo some of that work once you get past a certain point.
Once you get past a certain point, to undo it and redo it is, it's a challenge for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So you are super visible. You're on TV, you're in magazines, you have your own book. Do you still get enough time to do that, putting pen to paper? Or does your sort of day-to-day look a little bit different now?
No, it's still the same. You just have to, I get up at early, 4:30. Like I'll send an email out at 4:30 or 8 a.m. But I go to bed early too, so don't think I stay up late. I go to bed early. So it just, that social media stuff and all that, it's a lot of work. I don't care what anybody, it's a lot of work. I mean, being on the podcast, it's a lot of work. And then you have to edit this and post it. For your end, if it's even more work, I just have to show up and talk. But you have all the post-production, the pre-production, the planning. It's a lot of work. Everybody says you just show up on social media. It's work.
Yeah, absolutely. I was wondering whether, because the risk is like as you get bigger and bigger and you have more people in your team, I certainly find it with my teams, like I'm doing less of the actual practical doing on a day-to-day basis. I'm doing more of the strategy, whether there's a disconnect there. But it sounds like you're still very much in tune and you're still doing that on the daily basis.
Some of the best days are on the job site when the phone's, the phone's not ringing. Nobody's asking you a lot of questions. Sometimes it's very peaceful, actually. Just hanging out with the guys working. I don't really dig as much anymore, but it's nice to be on the job site every now and then.
Yeah. So it's
Because the
important.
technical stuff, the office stuff and all that is kind of like, like it's a drag sometimes, right? That's why I do what I do. I'm outside with my spray paint.
Yeah. So
That's where I'm the happiest. With my spray can in the nursery, picking out plants for a client is by far the best.
Yeah. I think it's important to know that those little things that make you really happy and keep you connected to what you love about what you're doing, and making sure that you're still able to do that regularly. Otherwise, you can get disconnected and completely. That's why I think where motivation can get squashed if you stop doing that sort of stuff.
Absolutely.
So I mentioned it before that you do have a book, Straight Dirt, but I was reading through it and it says that it's actually not a book about landscape design. It's about lifestyle design. Tell me about that.
Right. So we did it's a hardcover book, right? So we did a nice book, and it becomes I didn't want to make it a lot of text because nobody reads anymore. People love looking at pictures. So it's really a coffee table book, right? So there's a lot of picture in there, a lot of stories with clients and certain stories that we have, and certain design elements. Talk about lighting. We talk about certain plants, my favorite plants, just certain easy to read book. And it really is a lifestyle, right? So like we spoke from the beginning, it's like my job is to create your vision for your life and your family, right? It really comes down to creating memories outside. We had a couple of clients that, I had one client that was unable to swim. He's a 45-year-old man, could not swim. We put the pool in at the end of the summer. He invited me over and he said, watch this. And he jumped in the pool and he swam there and back. I mean, so those stories are really like, good, and the kids use the pool. We use the pool all the time. So you want to create memories for the people. Everybody's like, oh, I want to design a backyard. I want to keep my kids at home. I want to make my house the go-to house. All their friends come over and barbecue. So it's lifestyle. It's not landscaping. It really is a lifestyle design.
I like that. It seems like this whole conversation has been about you're designing for these outcomes. It's not just the design to be beautiful. It's literally to bring this lifestyle to life. I really think that's really cool to design with the outcomes in mind.
Well, yeah, ever since, when we had that pandemic, everybody wants to be outside. So we design outdoor offices now. It's just everybody has a new appreciation for outside. And in the Northeast where I live, it's cold from like end of October till it's cold now till April. So the season here is very short, the outdoor season. So people love to be outside in the springtime, in the summer, in the fall. It's a beautiful time of year because it's long, dark, cold winters here.
Wow. It's really interesting that people are still so motivated to invest so much in their outdoor spaces when they can only use it for half the year.
Half the year, right? Half the year. But what's happening is some of the trends are we're extending the season, right? We're extending the season. We're putting outdoor heaters, fire pits, outdoor TV. So they're trying to extend the season, outdoor fireplaces. So you can basically stay outside as long as you want. It's not, you're not going to go swimming, but you can certainly hang outside by the fire pit and cook outside and all. So that's really been a big help. Where we basically extended the outdoor season for 9 months instead of 6 months.
That's wonderful. That's better ROI for everyone, isn't it? Best return on investment if you can do these things.
Yeah, especially in the New York area where the property taxes are super high. So I try to tell them to maximize your entire property, try to utilize every single space. I've had clients say to me, oh, I never go outside. You never go outside because if my backyard looked like that, I wouldn't go outside either. Right. I said, let me create something that you want to go outside. And then they said, wow, I can't believe how nice it can look. Right. People just don't understand it because they're not living it. Right.
Yeah. So if someone wants to start this journey and they say, I'm never outside, I have this outdoor space I want to use better, what are the questions they should be asking themselves to really get to the crux of the vision for how they want to use that outdoor space?
Um, hey, what do I want to feel like when I go outside? I want to feel what do I want to feel like? I want to feel like calm. I want to feel like I'm on vacation. I want to feel like I don't want to travel anymore. I want to just walk in my backyard and have my own little micro resort out back, right? So that's step one. What do you want it to feel like? And then we have to see how much space we have to work with. We can design anything. uh, I've designed 10 by 10 rooftops, right? But you still try to make it their own, right? So you make it their signature space. So when people come home, they have a place to unwind and unplug and just reconnect with everything. Not, it's really about how do you make that space your own space, whatever that is, however big it is, whatever the budget is. It could be a plant in a pot with a chair. Seriously, like it can just be whatever, as long as you can call it your own little space, it's all you really need.
Wonderful. And I like that. It could be as small as big as you have. Everyone's got the opportunity to build a beautiful space that they love outdoors.
Sure, and budget can be you can spend $10. I always tell people, listen, you can get just as wet in a blow up swimming pool as you can in a $200,000 pool, right? Think about it. You can blow up a pool, go in and close your eyes. You feel like you're floating in a pool, right? So it all depends on what you want it to feel like and the budgets and all. But it really comes down to you know the feeling. It's all about the feeling. I really believe it is.
Yeah.
Because if you can achieve that feeling when you're all done, you've done it. You've done your job.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think I love that it keeps going back to that feeling at the forefront because so much of design is emotive and you want people to have that sort of visceral reaction where they like, oh, yes, this is relaxing, or yeah, I feel like I'm on holidays, or I'm in, Mexico partying on the beach or something like that.
Yeah, it's just people work hard. They want to enjoy their home. Look, home is like your safe space, right? Home is where when you go home, you're home, right? It's your space. It's secure. It's safe. It's your little nest, let's say, right? So you want to make it as comfortable as possible.
Mm, definitely. And so, I mean, this is Creativity Uncovered. It's all about creativity. And you said so yourself that you are creative and this is a creative act. How do you define creativity? Like, what is creativity to you?
Um, I I can't really put my finger on it. I mean, I don't design for me, right? Like, does that make sense? Like, it does. I know people that design plans or houses or whatever, but they have a certain style and it has to be that way. And you don't like it that way, it's not going to. That's the way I design. But for me, I really design it for the client and to try to get inside their head and to try to come up with creative ways to make everything work and look unique and everything. That's really what the process is, right? How do you make something unique? That's a flat backyard. How do you make it not how do you make it creative? So we bring in a lot of dirt, right? And we build up mounds and undulations so it gives it a little more mountainous feeling, right? Because anybody can do a flat backyard, right? It's how do you make it special, right? Sometimes we find a rock outcrop, like a boulder or something, and then we put a light on the rock. And how does that stand out in the yard? You want to create like little focal points, right? Little stories. We create little stories in the backyard.
I love that. I love that because it's includes problem solving and listening and communication and just coming up with new ways of approaching something, not being a cookie cutter sort of approach to your design.
Absolutely. Cannot do cookie cutter. My ADD won't allow it.
And it would be boring, right, to do the same thing
Oh,
day after day.
boring. Easier but boring, right? No. So the creativity part, And I don't believe it's I'm not creative at all. Everybody can be creative. It's you can paint your walls orange if you want, right? If that's what you like, there's no one size fits all. Definitely not. So it does. There's no set rules. It's you have to like it. You have to love it. If you don't come out and say, "Wow, that's amazing," I didn't do my job, right? So there's all different ways to become creative.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the cool thing about having you on this podcast is that, from what I've read and our previous conversations, I know that you are a creative person, but people wouldn't necessarily think that, if you in landscape design, that it's necessarily a creative pursuit. And that's why the podcast is so great because we are showing that it is and just opening people's imagination and expanding their view of what creativity is because everyone is creative. We just need to actually scratch the surface and figure out how.
I don't think I'm creative. I don't know. It's what I do, right? So maybe listen, certain things I would say yes, but then certain things no. Like stay in your lane, right? We talked about it. I'm not designing my kitchen. I'm not designing my inside. I have someone else to do that. I'm an outside guy, right? That's what I do. I design outdoor spaces, not inside. But I can help you with the inside, but the colors and all, it's different on the outside.
Don't ask you about grays.
Well, I could ask me about different color flowers. I can tell you all day what works good, what the good flower combination is, but not the color grays inside the paint.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Steve. That was a really cool insight into your creative process for how you manage these projects that you run. Yeah, thanks so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure. I love that. This has been my first Australian podcast. How is it? How is it the creative process over there? Kind of the same? Like it would seem like it would be the same globally, right? I mean, everybody thinks inside their head.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously, as you mentioned before, you really have to consider the context of the design. And our context would be different, but I'm sure there'd be the same fundamental elements of the design process that everyone would have to go through.
It's the same thing.
Yeah. It's particularly the communication piece that you said before, because behind every design or every project is a person, and you have to be able to communicate well to be able to bring them on the journey with you.
Absolutely. We just have different elements. Your weather is a lot different than ours. So it's still the same journey. Again, I'm not building a monument to myself. It's for clients, right? So my job is to just lead them up the mountain, right? They're the hero. I try to make them the hero in the project, right? So if I make them the hero and I'm just the guide to get them there, then it's a win-win for everybody.
Oh, that's very story brand of you. I don't know if you've heard of story brand. It's like it's kind of
look at you. Who you been listening to? Huh?
You're the guide on the journey. I like that.
Yes, those guys have really helped me out a lot, actually.
Yeah, it's a beautiful approach, I think.
It really is. It makes so much sense. It's like, wow, I didn't, so that's the way I try to, when I meet a new client, that's what I try to explain to them, that I'm not trying to force any design style on you or anything. I'm just trying to get it out of your head and make it a reality.
Perfect. That's cool. And I'm hoping that this podcast is sort of a little guide for people as well to help them kickstart their creative journey if they feel like they're not creative, or to help them bust through creative blocks if they are experiencing that.
Just go get a can of upside down spray paint. It's upside down. It has to be upside down. Because if you take a regular can of spray paint, it won't spray. But if you get the upside down, it works great.
There you go. A pro tip there.
There you go.
And yeah, that was Steve Griggs joining me today. And I also want to say thank you to everyone who's tuned into Creativity Uncovered. If you enjoyed this episode, please do jump online on Apple or Spotify and give us a rating or review, because that'll help this podcast find its way to new people who need it. And if this episode has helped you with your creativity, I'd love to hear about it. So please do send me a message, and we can help make the world a bit more of a creative space. Thanks so much. Until next time.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Take care.
If you've made it this far, a huge thank you for your support and tuning into today's episode. Creativity Uncovered has been lovingly recorded on the land of the Cubby Cubby people, and we pay our respect to elders past, present, and emerging. This podcast has been produced by my amazing team here at Crisp Communications, and the music you just heard was composed by James Gatling. If you liked this episode, please do share it around and help us on our mission to unlock more creativity in this world. You can also hit subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episode releases.